before we get started with Mr. Herden is our friends at Angry Audio have provided some assistance today.
I'm Catfish with Angry Audio. We have a new product. We call it the Headphone Disconnector. This is it. It's got a headphone plug on one side, so you can plug this into your mixing console or your headphone amplifier. And then it's got a jack on the other side, and you're going to plug your headphone cable into this. This connector in the middle is actually a magnetic connector that will separate in the event that you apply some force. So this is $29, by the way, and it's available from broadcast resellers and such as Broadcasters General Store, SCMS. Choose your favorite broadcast reseller. Call them, tell them that you want the Angry Audio headphone disconnector, and they'll fix you up.
So we thank our friends at Angry Audio for that. Next week, we're hoping to have a discussion on the AES loudness for streaming discussion and recommendations, and we'll let you know more about that as we go. Today, it's what we've all been waiting for. We're so happy to have Matt Herden here from Nautel, and he's going to talk to us about the new AUI that they've been working on, the HTML AUI. So Matt, if you have yourself unmuted, and we'll turn it over to you. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's good to be here. I'll tell you a bit about myself because I probably help to understand where I'm coming from. I've worked in the software industry for many, many years. Worked for people like Ashton Tate and Borland and Rational Software and a company in Vancouver called Active State. So my background is in software, and of course the big projects that I've been involved with at Nautel have been all software. So I've been a sales engineer and a product manager, and the product manager's job is to be the interface between you guys and the people that make the products. But it's worth noting I'm not a radio engineer. I'm a fan of radio. I grew up in England listening to pirate radio and various other stations. So I cut my teeth listening to Radio North Sea and Radio Caroline and all those guys, and listening to it with a little earbud in one ear and my phone, my radio, which I think I still have sitting around here somewhere, a little Sony. Anyway, so that's me. But what it does mean is that some of the things that I do with the AUI, you will look at and laugh because, of course, I'm not a radio engineer. So, you know, hold your laughter to yourself and just understand that I'm coming from a good place, but not necessarily a very expert place. So at Nautel, I rely on our experts within the team to keep me honest and guide the choices that I help make on behalf of you. So I've got a few slides to sort of introduce what we're doing, and so I'll share my screen if I may, and let's go to screen 2 and share that one, and I'll kick into present mode. Hopefully that'll work. Yes, you seen that?
We're seeing you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So the AUI is not just the AUI, and that's probably the biggest message that I want to come across with, is that the way that the AUI was implemented in the early days is that it actually was a full stack of an operating system, Linux, and then some middleware, and then this Flash-based website that was running right off your transmitter, as you probably know. So in order to replace the AUI, the Flash part, we have to replace absolutely everything. So it's very important to understand that the stack is being replaced. And I guess a very healthy percentage of you have already heard this from me at NAB. I think that was recently, no, a little while ago. Anyway, so it's a full new stack. And so I think of it as the new Nautel OS. It's an HTML version of the AUI, and so it runs on any modern browser. If you try and run it on Internet Explorer or some old piece of kit, not going to run because those browsers don't understand HTML5 or JavaScript or anything. The operating system that's underneath it is all new. And so we have had to actually sort of work incredibly hard. One of the biggest first efforts that we did, and why it's taken such a long time, is that we had to do a Linux environment that ran on all the transmitters, so that we now have a standard sort of single distribution that we run our transmitters on. The nice thing is that the actual AUI that gets transmitted to your browser from the site is about 1/10 of the size of the old Flash one. So the Flash one was about 9 megabytes, which if you've got low connectivity, if you've got low bandwidth on your connection, that's, as one person described it to me at NAB a couple of years ago, he said, yeah, I would click on to launch the Flash AUI, I would go make coffee, and by the time I came back, I could just hit F5 to refresh it, and they would show me the login screen. So he had enough time to make coffee on the old one on the bandwidth that he had. And the objectives that we had above and beyond going to HTML5 is to make it more robust, make it secure, and speed it up, and give us some flexibility. And HTML5, JavaScript, and all the modern stuff really does that for us. A little bit of history, because I think context is everything. So if we think back to when the AUI was introduced, it was actually in around 2008 with the NX series. And then that was followed by the NV series, then VS, NV Lite, and GV. So we're going all the way back to 2008, and so for a little bit of enjoyable context, 2008 was when Chrome was launched. So Windows 7 was the hot thing. The iPod Touch first generation, and actually the funny thing about that is that I'm actually using an iPod Touch for my analog audio that gets put into the transmitter that is stuck to the wall of my office here at home. So I have a VS300, and the audio is coming from my iPod Touch, and this is actually a first generation one, and you can see it's running there, and it's just going through there and plugged into the analog audio input. Breaking Bad was launched then. Dark Knight, Wall-E, Quantum of Solace, Mamma Mia. All of these things are, they're getting pretty old now. And Obama was elected president. So, 2008 was a long time ago. And so we had a lot of work to do. And the technology that we were dealing with back then, of 13 years ago, of technology that the VS, the NV Lights, and all of that tech, we've now got to take modern day 2020, let's say, technology and put it back into the hardware of 2008. So you imagine if I tried to do that with the iPod Touch. I mean, this iPod Touch has probably stopped getting updates 5 years ago. It's amazing, it still works. The screen's broken, all sorts of good things, but it works. It's my alarm clock. So this is what the architecture looks like. So down at the bottom, we've got a hardware abstraction layer, and that helps us not care about what's underneath in terms of the underneath the hardware, underneath the operating system. It allows the hardware to be different and the operating system to see it as the same. So it's the hardware abstraction layer. The operating system is associated with a configuration file so that it knows what a VS is, what a GV is, and so on and so forth. And then in the middle, we've got a data broker, and the data broker is the one that says, hey, hardware, give me this data, and I'm going to make it available. And it sits on essentially, if you conceive of it as like a carousel of data that's available. And then the AUI and anything else for that matter, SNMP and so on and so forth, can subscribe to the data that's sitting on this carousel. And so SNMP would come in and be part of that. It's a plug-in architecture. So, and we can talk a bit more about that in a bit. So that's the fundamental architecture and what it looks like when you sort of blow it out into the various series that we've got. The AUI, the data broker, and the operating system are all common to all the transmitters. So we've really can sort of converge a lot of the technology. So doing the subsequent ones is a quicker effort, and also the maintenance of it is brought down quite a bit. So you can see that as we go across here, we've got these individual hardware extraction layers. The configuration files are different, but everything else is the same as you go across the various series. Okay. So let's dive into the AUI itself, because that's really why we're here. That's the underpinnings, and so it helps you to understand, you know, how this needs to be dealt with. So it's a new web browser that's sitting on your transmitter, brand new. It has to support HTML5, it has to support JavaScript and a whole ton of other technology. It doesn't have to support Flash anymore, which is really good. It uses HTTPS if we want. This one is not set up for that, but that's a detail. And the faster load time, it's smaller, and it also uses responsive design. In the initial releases, in the first version, we're only focused on the desktop version. That doesn't mean it won't work on a tablet or a phone or something like that. It does. It won't look as pretty as it should do. In the second release, we'll follow up with fine tuning the way it looks and behaves on a phone and also on tablets. I've tested it at home. I run an Android phone. My partner runs iPhones, and she has iPads and all sorts of stuff. My other computer, which is sitting over here, is an iMac. So I certainly am very familiar with running all of a wide variety of technology. And of course, Nautel is standardized on Windows. So that's kind of where we're at there. So responsive design lets us support all of that with just one thing that's been delivered to from the transmitter to the device. The benefits of what we've done are, from a technology point of view, the maintenance of everything is it's more robust, it's simpler, it's more straightforward. You get easier, faster updates. Of course, you'll be able to choose whether you have an update or not. It's got modern security. And very importantly, AUI longevity. I mean, you can imagine that even if Flash had not been a problem, that everything else that was on the transmitters that we've had was already getting pretty old. Flash was not brand new when we started to use it. It was newish, but it was not brand new. And so it would have run out. So we're still selling these transmitters. And so we want to give you as long a road forward for your roadmap of use out of this hardware for as long as possible. So AUI longevity is a huge deal for us, and why we decided to invest such a huge amount into the development of this. And better performance, consistency. So we wanted to have the same code running on all the transmitters, and standard interfaces. And this is at a technical level of plugins and things like that, but also with standard things that you can purchase and include in your software. So we've worked very hard on following standards. We do use some open source software as well, and so we've leveraged what's out there to come up with what we think is a really excellent solution. For you guys, the user benefits are the responsive design gives us the device independence. Actually, I guess these next few bullets are not part of responsive design, so they should actually come back out. So it's easy to learn. It's really straightforward. You can feel the DNA with the old AUI in terms of the wording that's used and the layout and the menu choices. I've worked hard to sort of eliminate some of the inconsistencies and the confusion that the old AUI led to. So that's resulted in a much flatter menu structure. So I found that when I started using the Flash AUI, I was never sure whether I was supposed to go to the system menu or the user settings or the system settings, or, you know, so I'd kind of hunt around everywhere, and eventually I'd find what I needed. But it was, I think we've solved that. And of course, it works on touch screens, so I can, you know, launch it on my phone and see it just fine, and interact with it. Obviously, a big deal for users is it'll be a free upgrade. So despite the gigantic investment that we made in this, we are very happy to provide it as a free upgrade, because we know that it's what you guys need. And so, you know, that's a good thing. We feel good about that. Let's see now. So sort of go back a little bit and summarize what I've just kind of said. It's a whole new software stack, HTML5, updated Linux, loads fast, robust, secure, fast, flexible, and then more importantly, the first thing that you're going to see is the VS series beta, and that's imminent. You can the next slide will have the sign up, but you can find it on very easily on our support site. And then the sequence will be the VS followed by GV, MV Lite, NX, and NV. Probably the NX will be separated into high power and low power. It depends on how it shakes out in the development. But that's the sequence of the release schedule. I can't get more specific than that, because, you know, it's software, and software is a nuisance and unpredictable in sometimes. But we're feeling really good right now about what we've got to show you. These are the resources that you can get a hold of, and I'm just getting the slides out of the way so I can move into the demo. So the resources are, if you go to support.nautel.com and then /AUI, and it's available from the menu, you'll go straight to the AUI page. From that page, there's also a link to the AUI beta. And so you can sign up for it there. Many of you already are signed up, and you'll be hearing from me shortly. So that's basically how that's going to work. Any questions before I start a demo? I'll leave this up for a sec. Going once. I'll take that as a no. Okay. So let's go into the AUI. So this particular AUI is running on a VS 300, which was sitting, I actually bolted it vertically onto the wall of my office here. So it warms the office quite nicely during the winter, as long as no one turns it on, because that's noisy. And so we're going to log into here. And you can see down at the bottom here, we've got this little, what they call toast, like a little toaster popping up. Toast tells you that something has happened and it's been successful. It'll just disappear. So I'm going to just sort of walk through the interface bit by bit, because I don't want to miss anything. So I'm going to just sort of go through it in a pretty sequential sort of way. First off, you'll see that we've got, you know, Spectrum widget, the Spectrum instrument, and then we've got 4 panels here. The modulation one, which shows us which exciter is active, the alarms page, which has nothing on it right now, and then the audio inputs. I think occasionally my iPod goes to sleep, but hopefully we're in good shape. Yeah. That looks a little sleepy. Oh, the clock's ticking, it should be fine. So if we had alarms that would show up, and we'll see that in a little bit. We've got meters here, and we can go ahead and choose to add more meters onto the list, and they will appear right here as they just did. If you wanted to, you can go ahead and choose a different panel here. So I can put the meters here, and I can go ahead and put the instrument panel down at the bottom here. So how you lay it out is entirely up to you. I'm going to put it back to the way it was, and oops, I want to do that one there and this one there. So you can see it's pretty snappy, pretty straightforward. It's not a problem. Along the top, and it's obscured a little bit by my presentation screen here, but I'm running full screen. This is forward power, reflective power, the temperature, which is a representative temperature. So this one is whatever the VS gives us as a representative temperature. I assume you get to know whatever your temperature should be, and if it's not what it should be, then you start to panic. And then modulation. And I'll accept all the blame for any icon that you don't understand. I designed a lot of them, and so if you don't like them, you'll have to let me know, and we'll see what we can do to improve them. But I did work on them with other people to understand them, what was right. If we want to turn the RF on, we can go ahead and do that. I'll have to start shouting because, of course, the VS is right here in the office. And you can see we're coming up to the set point. And I'll go ahead and turn that off now. But as you can see, things start to move at that point. And remote and local is shown in the top corner here. The only time that this pair of buttons becomes active is when it's on the front panel of something like a GV or an NX, where you're actually dealing with the front panel screen, and this is the user interface for making changes to the transmitter. If I walked over to the VS and switched it into local mode, then I would lose the ability to interact with the screen and change things. So it would lock me out essentially, but I could still browse around and look at the information. The other thing that I can do, and can you see the top bar where it shows you the active preset name?
Yes.
You can. Okay, that's covered up with my Zoom stuff. So, so on my other on my other computer, I'm going to switch it over to analog, a different preset. And so what we'll see is that this one will now switch over, and you'll see a different set of information. So before it was getting its feed from, I think it was MPX, and now, I don't have, and now it's getting it from an analog source, and you can see everything's, all the little bouncy things are starting to jump up and down.
Hey, Matt Herndon, it's Kirk Harnack. I was yesterday years old. I was yesterday years old when I found out you can actually grab that Zoom bar with your share and move it out of the way. I did not know that until yesterday.
I can. Oh, look
and
at
it
that.
was messing up with my presentation too, so that's what brought it to my. I
moved it out of the way. Thank you very much, Kirk.
Awesome, thanks.
Yep, thank you. Yes, so if I were to do that same switch, I would just choose whichever preset I wanted and go ahead and I can switch to that one if I wanted and click yes. Pardon me. I'm going to switch it back to the analog one because that's one that I've been using it on. I want to have one that's got an error. Yeah, so MPX low. So now what happens is that we have an alarm. It's telling us that the MPX is low. And so we also get this icon at the top that shows us we've got one warning. Yellow is warning, red is a full-on alarm. And so we can go ahead and look at that one. We can also filter out this. So if you've got, a lot of situations, you'll have a bunch of alarms that you kind of want to ignore. So you can go ahead and click on it. And then when you click on the filter icon, it will tell you you've got one hidden one. If you had 20 hidden ones, it would show 20 in that little bubble. If you click on the filter, then it will show you the grayed out ones that you're ignoring. So that's our way of showing what you've got. You can also jump to a report, which is a lot of times you've got a bunch of alarms. You want to print a report out. So this is actually going to have a look at all the different things that have happened on this transmitter. And it's broken out by device, et cetera, and then you can apply a filter to it. So you can say, I want to have RF state change, and we can see that. So now if I download the report, I will get a report for the RF state changes. Or I can just unfilter it and just take the whole works down. So if I download that report, it's going to say, oh, you want to open these with Excel? And I'll say yes, and Excel will boot up, and there it is. So you get all of the data for that, and you can just dump it out. If you want to go home, it's just like a regular website. So you just click on the Nautel logo, and that will take you back to the dashboard. So to the home page, if you like. So that's how that works. And you can do that from anywhere. So if you ever want to just get back, you can also use the menu. So let's start going through the menu. So the menu is a typical, what we call a hamburger menu. And so it's got everything that you would need to get to: your alarms, the meters, presets, settings. There's only one settings area, reports and software. So the dashboard is where we're at. Let's go we've had a look at the alarms, and then we can dive into the meters. Meters on the VS is broken out into controller and exciter, and we can just see all of the values that we want are here. And if we wanted to, we could just, bits is just text. So one of the big problems with something like Flash is that the information you're seeing on the screen is not actually text on a browser page. It's actually a graphic. So you can take a screenshot, but you can't copy the information. Here I can do a Control-C. I could launch Excel and dump it into that one if I happen to want to. Same thing with any of the information. It's very grabbable. So that's the meters page. Presets. So this is where you maintain your presets. Obviously, you can go up to the top menu and change your preset at any time. But here's where you can edit them, clone them, or delete them. One of the things that you'll notice is that if I choose this one and I want to delete it, I'm actually going to be prevented from doing that. Again, this little thing is in the way. I cannot delete this preset because it's used in remote IO. So it's warning you that this is not something you can do. If we want to go ahead and edit one, we just click on the edit icon, and it's loading the definition of the preset from the transmitter up into the browser, and then we can go ahead and make the various settings and changes that we might want to. If you have an Orban, I'm going to move this funny little thing here, the zoom thing. Is there a way to make it completely hidden? Hide floating meeting controls. Yes, good, thank you. That's better. If you have an Orban, you can go ahead and enable it. If you don't, you can't. I have an Orban in this one, and I have it in the preset for audio, the analog audio. I have it set to soft rock, I think, or something. And then if you've made some changes here, you can just go ahead and save them. Or you can just go back to the list and do something else. If you wanted to create a new preset based on this one, you can hit the clone button, and it will create an exact copy of that with the word copy there, and that makes it really easy when you're, because mostly you're probably going to have the same settings and then make some adjustments. The thing that's worth noting on this page is that there's this gray text which says preset 1, 2, 3, 4. What is this? This is the name that the front panel UI uses to refer to that preset. So you can tell which one it's talking about. So think of this name here as being its nickname, which we use in the AUI. And then this name is the one that's used by the system, and the front panel UI, which is obviously on a VS with the crystal fonts, is limited by the amount of characters, and that's the internal name. So so we've included both so that you can have a good idea of what's going on. Preset scheduler is very similar to the old one, and you can, it takes a little while to load up because it's a lot of information and depending on what you've got. So, so here we've got various schedules here. And so we've got schedules that switch it from streaming over to analog and streaming back again and things like that. But I'm not a radio engineer, so I don't understand this too well. And then you can enable or disable it. So you can just turn it on and off.
Did you fix the scheduler where it will go from year to year?
So walk me through that. What am I supposed to do to prove that you're right or wrong?
I talked to you at the NAB about it. I have an NX5,
Right.
and when I would set up my scheduler for 2000, and I'd go to 2001, it carried it over, and I had to change some things that changed, like pre-sunrise.
I imagine that this should work absolutely correctly because we didn't take any of the code from the old one into the new one. The old one was written in Flash and the new one's written in this. What does come over is the information being stored. So so hopefully there wasn't, I don't think there would be anything wrong with the database, but we'll check on that. So yeah, we'll dive into that offline. So that's your presets, and let's dive into settings. So with their settings, these are now alphabetically sorted. Everything's there. If you've got a feature, it appears. So in this particular one, we've got audio processing, which is Orban inside, so that appears and it's active. I do not have HD on this one, so it is grayed out, but it does exist. So the menu never really changes. The only thing that changes is whether a menu option is active or not, whether you have that feature or not. So you don't have to sort of go, this one's got Orban, or where's the Orban menu, or something like that. So you can get a lot of familiarity here. But I've essentially sort of merged the system settings and the user settings into one, where it's one place that you can deal with everything. And the stuff that's really important, which I assume our alarms, meters, and presets are in separate places at a higher level. So if you want to adjust your settings, you go to the settings menu and just that one place for everything. If you make a change to something, so if I edit this, then the button will show up blue and you can go ahead and save it. I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm not going to touch it. Audio processing. My mouse occasionally ignores me. This is the standard Orban thing. The names that are provided here are Orban names, so I don't control those, or we don't control those. But you can go ahead and choose whichever one you want. So, rock medium, rock loud, that sounds good. Yes, let's change it. And if we go into here and edit this, what we'll see, and we have these kind of little adjusters for the various things. It's starting to become clear why it takes a long time to build software these days, isn't it? There's all sorts of adjustments that you can turn on or off, or increase or decrease. But what you'll notice is that on this particular one, which is one of the built-in presets, we can only do a save as. I cannot just save, and that's because Orban doesn't let me. So that's an important thing about the way the Orban card works. The actual audio processing that it has can only be cloned and saved as something else if you want to make changes to it. The top one here, if we look at that one, oh, sorry, I gotta set that to be the active one. So if I'm going to edit that one, then now I can either save it or save as. So I can either copy it to something else, or I can save it as is. And that's because it's my own preset, CMYK rock. CMYK is because the island at the bottom of the road is called Micouz, and so everything to do with this station on my fake radio transmitter is to do with Micouz. So that's audio processing, and So you have full control over it. It's very similar to the one in the old AUI. External 10 megahertz. So if you have one of those, you can turn it on and save that. HD, as I said, in beta 1, we will not support HD. We've kind of got a lot of it working, but we don't want to test it yet. So that'll be in a beta 2. Network settings, these are all running. There's one bug that doesn't show the gateway setting. It's not particularly important. It's read-only information anyway. But these are all the internal sort of things that if you look at the front panel UI, that's what's on it. This is the IP address is the local router IP address that's given to it. These are things like, I think, Google DNSs or something like that. So those are public. And it shows you the MAC address and all that kind of stuff. This is green. That's because DHCP is turned on the front panel UI. I cannot change it here. If this were a GV or an NX, that would be different. You can make those changes. So that's network. Notifications. So the way that this works is that you, I've taken the email server configuration and put it to being part of the notifications because it's part of the notifications. Which sounds a little circular, but notifications don't work unless the email server is configured properly. And the only purpose that the email server configuration has is to provide notifications. So they're now on the same page. This allows you to use SMTP for a host, do the various settings, and that's, so these are example settings for this account. I created this demo account in Gmail. There's a password and it's real. So I can just type in an email address and it will go and send a test email. And then then I can go ahead and create notifications that will get sent to whichever email I define. So if I click on this one, we can see that that's Matt Hurden at Nautel.com, wish to receive forward power low notifications if these alarms happen, whether there's very low, low, shutdown, limiting. Those are the ones I care about. So and you can go in and create whatever you want. You can go through the list and you just click on the blue arrow to copy it from over here over to here. So you just assemble whatever kind of notification you want. And I can add multiple emails. So if we've got a group of people for this one particular notification, those people can get the email. So it's very straightforward. The notifications are not tied to the user database on the transmitter. So these are just, I could put my personal email in here for the notifications, and the transmitter doesn't have to know who I am. It doesn't have to have a login for it. When there are passwords, wherever we can, we've put the option to show the password. I'm not going to show this particular one because it's a real Gmail account and it's my real password, and I hate changing passwords. So that's notifications and email server configuration. Phone home has been completely revamped, and we'll be talking a lot more about that in the future. But basically, it's here and it's still working. So I've enabled this one. It knows internally that this is a VS300. It knows my MAC address. I've entered, and we're asking people to include their serial numbers because it's a very useful thing to have when we're trying to help you. Then the serial number gets punched in here. The call sign is required, company name, and your email address. So what happens with Nautel Phone Home, because I think a lot of people may not even know much about it, but basically what it does, it says, I want Nautel to pay attention to my transmitter. And what happens is that when you save this, it creates a connection between your transmitter and a cloud server. And the cloud server collects periodic data, and I think it's every 15 minutes or so. It's not very much. If it sees anything bad, like a bad alarm or something like that, it will increase the number of data points that it sends and how often it sends so that it can capture a better picture of what's going on. We then have people at Nautel who will monitor these things, and that if you are at a point where, so what will happen is that if our technicians will see this information and can contact you and say, by the way, you might want to have a look at this transmitter. It's got a problem. So we're kind of here to help you as a secondary watchdog over your systems. You can create your own notifications, of course. The other thing that happens is that we log this data points to the cloud, and we just collect it. We don't delete it. We're just collecting it. At some point, maybe in the future, we'll have a kind of a trailing edge where we delete stuff. But at the moment, we don't think that's going to happen. But be a problem here, or that seems to be a problem. Here's some evidence. So we're essentially collecting evidence for you. Can you hear me? Because my internet was claiming to be unstable there.
Yeah,
right?
you froze for just a moment, but you're back.
Okay. I got a message there. So anyway, so Phone Home is intended to sort of be one, grab the opportunity for us to be able to contact you in case something bad is happening, and two, gather data so that when bad things do happen, we've got data that we can look at and help understand the problem that you've encountered. So that's Phone Home. Security certificates. So this allows us to go ahead and pull a certificate file from my local hard drive and put it up in the cloud. We will be using these in things like Phone Home and other elements of the system. I don't quite understand these yet, but it allows us to bring the certificates back up into the transmitter and go for a very robust situation. SNMP. We now, by default, we're V2C. In the future, this drop down will actually drop down and allow you to choose version 3 as well, which would then have a password associated with it, in addition to the community strings. So there's some minor changes going on here where we will actually hide. This is actually the string is actually the word public. the string here is private. So that's not exactly a secure approach. So we're changing this. We're going to just put a nickname there, and you'll be able to see that. That's in a new build that I don't have yet. You can also have traps and have multiple traps and keep adding them, deleting them, and so on. Works a little bit like your notifications, but yeah, so that's SNMP is all up and running. The other thing that's probably worth mentioning for people that have VSs, obviously there's a lot of people that stayed with, I think it was 4.2.6, because in the 5.x we had some hiccups. I'm going to leave it at that with SNMP. And so as far as we can tell, those problems are gone. So by doing this whole new operating system and everything, the problems that we had with SNMP seem to have disappeared. We will find out as we beta test. We haven't seen any problems in our testing internally. Yes.
Is it the same MIB, or do you have new MIBs?
Say that word again.
Is it the same MIB as the old VS?
Oh, it's different. It has to be different. Yeah, no, yeah. What happens is if the MIB is a function of the way you organize your data, and because we've rebuilt everything, our data is mostly different. So the MIB will be different. So we will be working with our partners and third parties and everyone else like that to sort of proliferate the new MIBs. So we will, when we launch this, actually prior to launching this, we'll be sharing the MIBs. But we want to make sure that they're rock solid before we start sharing them. Okay. Spectrum mask, you get to choose which one you want. Same as before. If you chose a different one, the save comes on. The NTP, if you want to, you can put your NTP server here, and by default it will boot up once you do your upgrade to UTC. I usually like to turn it off and go ahead and choose Canada, because that's where I live, and Halifax. And I love the fact that Halifax is second. It means I don't have to go scrolling. And then click save. And we'll see the time go from 1854 and 30 seconds. It's in a second, it will change to the proper time. Unless my demo has just been pooched, but hopefully not. 15:54. So now the time is reading the correct time for me, and not UTC. Transmitter ID. This used to be called call sign, which is really very, very, what's the word? Incorrect, because you can use it for a call sign, but you know, one of our engineers, he would call his transmitter beer fridge, and you know, and that's okay. Whatever you want to recognize this by is what can be on here. So what I've done is I put the model of the transmitter, a VS300, and the serial number. So this transmitter is that. So in the browser, you can see that as being the in the tab. That's what you see. So if we go up to the top here, you can see my tab here is VS300 and that number. So if I have multiple tabs, because I've got 5 transmitters that I take care of, I can tell which one I'm talking about, because this transmitter ID is something that I understand and is meaningful. So I can switch between, oh, here's the GV and here's the backup and here's this and here's that. So it just makes life a lot easier to keep track of what you're doing. Users, when you get this, you know, there'll be 2 accounts that are built in, and one is the admin account, which is the has the God mode powers, if you like, and then the second one is a viewer account, which is read only. So as I like to say, is, you know, humorously, is that the administrator accounts for the engineer and the station owner gets the viewer one. But if we go into here, we can see that this is an administrator account. I can go and change these names. I can associate an email address with it. I can choose a language. We haven't done the language conversions yet, but that's coming. And then you can see that it's the person has these powers, and this person can make those changes. I can also change the password. If I go into the viewer account, we can see that they have no privileges, and it's read only, and so on and so forth. So as an administrator, I could give them powers, that I can grant them that, but I'm not going to do that because this is a helpful, a handy login to have. My suggestion is that the day you get this, you change the passwords. And I know that that's not something that a lot of people like doing, but it's a good idea. And in fact, I think if I log out and we look at this, the default password for our new admin account is change me. Okay, so there's a clue there as to what we think you should be doing. And you can choose the language. Sorry, I kind of skipped over that too quickly. You can change the language right from the login screen. So if you happen to be, once we've done the language conversions, but if you happen to be wanting to use Spanish or French or whatever, then you can choose that right from the login screen, as opposed to struggling your way through a menu. But you can create as many accounts as you want. So you could create, you know, this engineer, that engineer, the station owner. If you've got an AUI running in the lobby of a radio station, you could put one up there and have a special login for that, so that, you know, no one can mess around with the settings. A read only would be a good use for that. So there's that. Let's think. I think, yeah, and I think one of the areas is that, yeah, I know this is overmodulating, you know, and that's because on my my iPod, I just set the volume on the bottom slider, and this is not a well developed input to it. So anyway, so that's one of the things that, you know, I know is wrong. And I think that's it. I think we've looked through everything. We can see that along the top, we've got the preset name, we've got the name of the transmitter, the ID, with any other information that's been set in the preset, and the frequency, the mode, the set point, all those kind of good things are there. And so there it is.
That's great, Matt. We sure appreciate all the work that's gone into this. And my goodness, it's going to take a little bit of time for us to discover all the goodies.
Well, it's my hope is that when you set this side by side with the old AUI, and I'm going to do kind of a slide deck that has it page by page, so you can kind of look up your old page and see where the new page is, to make it a bit easier. But I think what you'll find is that it's hopefully you'll find it very intuitive. The chunks of information are all pretty much the same, and that the difference is really just in where we've collected it. And I think the big change is in the setting area. But yeah, enough of my bibble babble. What questions do we have?
Kurt Weiner here. I have a question regarding control functions on this.
Yep.
I don't know, this may already exist, but one of the stations I deal with has dual NT20s, I'm sorry, NV20s combined. And one of the things that I thought would be handy on this, and maybe it is buried in there somewhere, would be auxiliary contacts, you know, that could be used to control other things, such as switch antennas or change audio paths or whatever utility. Just have auxiliary functions that you could have, like aux1, aux2, aux, same, and name them whatever you want, so that you could get access to things outside of the transmitter that you would want remote controlled, be able to remote control. You follow what I'm asking?
Yeah, and actually that does remind me, there is one area which we have explicitly left out of this version of the software, and it will come in their second release, which is remote control. The remote IO section was removed from the AUI for the first release because there was a lot of work there, and it needs to be done right. You can still make your changes to remote IO on your front panel UI, and so you're not, it's not, the feature is still available, but just not through the AUI. I'd be interested in learning more about that. So what you're describing, so if it's not what I'm saying there, then I think, if we can connect on email, then I can learn a bit more about that and understand it.
Yeah, he's talking primarily also some I. It would be good to be able to see like your room temperature or something like that every time you bring this up.
Right.
Matt, several people have asked about exporting information from the existing AUI to be put into the new one. Is that going to be possible?
The things like presets come across automatically. User accounts do not. A lot of your, most of the settings, depends where the settings are stored. So we will have in the README for the upgrade, we will tell you what you need to copy down and set aside, and what you can rely on coming across automatically. So that'll be in the upgrade guide to sort of let you know what you have to worry about. Like the scheduler. Like the scheduler, I don't know if the scheduler is ignored or brought across. So I have to defer to the developers. I know that the user interface part of it has been sort of redone, but whether it's storing its information in the same place and it recognizes it, I don't know that yet.
Question is asked about the widgets, like the Constellation view for HD. Will that be included? Yeah,
and we have a list of them, and they're in priority. So in the first version for VS, we've just gone with the spectrum analyzer, and But in the subsequent versions for GV and obviously NX, I think Lissajous, Smith chart, and so on. I think AM, PM. I rely heavily on our engineers, and I know that I'm going to get a lot of people coming back to me and saying, "Oh, I need this," but we don't. We're trying to make sure that whatever instruments we include are actually useful and used. Do people use the oscilloscope a lot? I don't know. So, my impression is that quite a few might. And so I want to make sure that we don't put on the chopping block something or defer doing something that actually people find useful. So we're going to rely on the beta test and also the early phases of that. The good news is that adding a new widget here is not hard to do. In fact, if you look at this, guess what? Why is there so much space here? Yes, because in the early versions, there was a mock-up that had multiple instruments here. So this will expand to support whatever we need.
I think keeping the Lissajous there, even for the 300, would be a good idea.
And that is the intention. So, the Lissajous is a very, I know it's popular. So we had hard choices to make, so we made them.
I can assume you only have one widget on the screen at a time. So how do you quickly change the widgets?
You can have multiple widgets.
Okay, but only one at a time on the screen.
Well, how do you mean?
On my AM, I have 4 widget. I have the Smith's chart, I have the spectrum analyzer, I have the modulation, all on one screen.
And there's 2 areas that you can work with. The smaller part, which is what you're describing in the old AUI, you could have this minimized into something that was kind of like this. So if I were to mimic the old AUI by just putting the instrument panel in the same place, it's going to get very repetitive. But if this was a Lissajous, this was a Smith chart, and so on and so forth, you could populate this area here if you wanted. You've got your alarms up in the top here. You then might say, you know what, I want to put my meters here.
Just one comment. From what I understand, this is going to be responsive to however big the browser window is, right? And that's one thing we talked about before. So if you had like a 4K or an 8K monitor, you could go to town. You could have every meter up.
Well, the monitor I'm actually running this on is a 4K monitor. It's a 27-inch 4K monitor. And so this is as fancy as it gets at this stage of the game.
Okay, well then you can have at least 4, which is what you're trying to replicate is what we have today.
Exactly. So and if you only wanted 3, then you could certainly put your your modulation up here or whatever you want. So you get to customize this. On this build, it's not saving what's here, but so if I go to another page and come back, it's going to go back to where it was. But that's coming.
Another thing, not to interrupt, I know we're kind of running short on time. I don't know if it was covered earlier, but since you have the live demo up, can you show them if it's working, the responsive design where when you collapse it, like so one of the beauties of HTML5 is that it'll scale well onto other devices, other like phones and tablets. So that's one thing that Matt was working on with this.
So I'm gonna go back to the page, and as you can see, it's reset it. If I drop out of that mode, you can see that this size now is doing what I call the 1+2. And as I change the screen, it will self-adjust to meet the requirements of that screen size. And then what you're talking about is as it gets closer, you can see that these things just stack themselves up. The time is also stacked up. And this is where we're getting to the point where I described earlier that the responsive design for mobile and tablets has yet to be optimized. We're going to go into here and tweak
this looks pretty
CSS.
Good for something that's still in progress. And this also would help you if you were going to do multiple tabs or multiple browsers for multiple transmitters on one computer.
Exactly.
Stuff like that. So it's much more flexible. Just most of the HTML5 designs out there are much more flexible. So I just thought that'd be worth
Absolutely.
pointing out since you have the live demo out, and it's something I know you.
Yeah,
guys are
that's
working
right.
on.
Yeah. Thanks, Alan.
There you go.
Um,
Do I get anyone who signs up today? Do I get a commission?
Yeah, exactly. Or a free
One,
hat.
two.
A free hat.
Are screens changeable for different users to have different meters and things listed?
That is, again, the intent. So if you do install, if you do have different logins for different people, we want to save the settings and the layout per user. We haven't done that yet, but that is the goal. That's in our terminology, that's in the backlog. So the backlog is everything we want to do that we're going to do one day. And so it's up to the team and me to sort of help prioritize those. And that's where, you know, me talking to you as a group and listening to what's important. Are instruments more important, or are settings by user more important? Or, you know, so we will start to talk about having those conversations with you to figure out what are your priorities in terms of what to see. Now, this is how it would look on a phone, and in fact, I'll just log into it on my phone, and because I got it bookmarked. So so this is the default. Let me see. Oh, it's not on the desktop site. That's good. So it's default. You can see it's a little too big for, can you see that in my screen? Is it a little bit small, I guess? And then, so when I submit, it's going to do the login, and it's doing that, the usual thing. And eventually it's going to end up looking a little bit like what you're seeing on the main screen there. I know this is kind of a weird little demo, but anyway, so that's, and the important thing is that this is actually the default behavior of responsive design for the phone with zero coding by our developers. They just chose the responsive design library, and this is what they got for free. So without doing any work on it, we've already got something that's kind of mostly usable on a phone. I can, of course, in my browser on the phone, choose down at the bottom here, it says desktop site, and I can go ahead and check that, and then it will actually redraw the screen as if it were, and I usually run it sideways, and now it's going to look like it does on the main screen, because it's treating it as if it's not mobile.
Matt, Stoney asks, he's expecting a VS1 to be shipped next month. Can it have the new AUI installed at the factory?
The new ones that will have the AUI, you're going to be right on the cusp, because we've got to get through our beta 1 and our beta 2 and then go through the final QA. So I would say that's a little early, but the upgrade is not hard to do. I mean, literally it's 15 minutes. I have done so many upgrades on this VS, the poor thing's exhausted. And all that I do to do that is I take the files from our website, from a website, put it onto a USB, stick it in the USB A, and hit OS recovery. I walk away for 15 minutes or 20 minutes, come back, and it's done. At the moment, the only thing you have to do at the end is just wait, because it takes a little while for some of the hamsters to finish running. And so once that's done, the screen will, you can just navigate to the appropriate IP address and go ahead.
Is anything changing for the GV series, or is it going to be possibly dropped?
How do you mean?
Like I have a GV5.
Right.
And it has an option to use it over the internet. We didn't get it, and I was told, yeah, it'll be like the NX next time around, but then I heard later on, maybe not.
Oh, you definitely. I mean, it's the next one we're going to do.
Oh, the GV? Okay.
Yeah, the GV, definitely. In fact, you know, if I were to go back to the slides, you know, NV is still on the roadmap. I mean, we're going to go all the way back to our oldest hardware and give you a brand new operating system, which is, I think, pretty amazing. So this will be the user interface on the front panel of your GV, and it will also be the interface remotely. So this is your AUI, whether you're local or remote.
Okay. Richard wants to know, has the host connection issue been resolved?
Expand on that a little bit, because I may not recognize that description of it.
Richard?
Frequent messages on some Nautel transmitters that the host connection has been lost. Sometimes it comes back. Sometimes you have to go to the site and do a front panel restore. But
and what system are you on?
Eric Schechter and others on this call right now.
Yeah. Sorry, and which series?
GV. I've seen it on the VS and the NV20LTs.
Yep.
So
okay. So those ones were a bit flaky on connectivity. The old AUI, it had problems for whatever reason that we were never we spent a gigantic amount of effort trying to understand what the heck was going on, and that's where a lot of people ended up. For SNMP stuff, they stayed with 4.2.6 because 5.2 was attempting to solve the connectivity problem. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. Some people thought it was a DNS problem when you set up the transmitter. I went all through that and tried it. I still get it on some transmitters.
Yeah. So I think that, I think we've fixed it. So that's what I would say is that I think that in the new AUI and this entire stack, I run it all day long on this, on my systems. I never don't have the AUI running at this point on the old one, sorry, on the new one. And I usually have it logged in on my phone. I've got it on my Windows system, and a lot of times in 2 different windows on my Windows system. And then I also run it on my iMac over here. So I'm constantly sort of just monitoring it. At this point, we still think the host watchdog is a very good thing to leave on. So we just leave that running.
Good. More.
But our goal is to not have it be.
I am actually on the what do you call it? The lunch meeting with Barry Michigan's group.
And we can hear you.
Sorry.
There we go.
We do have a question though. Any differences in install time or ease with a solid state drive versus a flash drive?
And this would be on like a GV, or are you talking about the media?
Yeah, he's talking about the media. Not more specific.
I do it from this, this little doodad here, which we give away like candy at NAB, I think. And it doesn't take much time at all. Like I say, I don't think it takes a lot of time. Probably the limiting factor, certainly on the VS, is probably the actual hard drive technology that's inside the VS. It's the writing of data, not the reading of data. That'd be my guess.
So another person, I think, makes it a little clearer. Will this require us to remove the compact flash or the SATA SSD from the transmitter, or can it all be done in place? GV, NVLT, and VS.
VS is always done through the USB. There's no compact flash or anything like that to worry about. I think the NV lights are the same. And for GV, where some are on the old compact flash and the new ones are on some other new technology, I can't remember. I think it was a solid state SSD. Those ones I don't know. We haven't got to the point where we're deciding on how the installation works. But we will. We'll sort that out. I don't think it's going to be a headache. I think you'll find the installation part is going to be very straightforward. It doesn't take long. If I recall rightly, on my VS, it felt like it took me about 45 minutes to do a full OS recovery upgrade type of scenario. And with this, it feels a lot more like 20 minutes. It's way quicker. And that's going from 5.x to the new AUI.
Okay, well, we're running now a little over an hour, and is there anyone having any other questions for Matt?
Bert Weiner here. Have one last questions, if I might.
Go ahead.
Maybe this is already in place in the system, but for example, if I have the two NV20s. If I load this system in and I get all my parameters and all the setup that I want in it, is there a way to download this into a flash drive, memory stick, whatever, so that it comes the time I might have to replace the computer portion? It would just be a matter of reloading it from a previously saved file.
We have that in our backlog. We absolutely want to be able to do some kind of a backup for you so that you can kind of back up and restore essentially from a situation, or share settings. So if you've got 5 systems that are almost identical and you just want to kind of take them, clone them, and sort of copy them across. We haven't done that yet, but it's definitely on the list of things that we would like to do. So it's a great idea. We like that one.
How about the XR series AM?
That never had an AUI, right?
It had an optional module you could put in it to access.
Was that the
it via
NX link? NX link, right?
This was just an.
I think
had
that
a 5 kilowatt XR, and I thought it was going to be like the NV, but it wasn't. And they said, no, you've got to add another module to it and get internet out to your site, and then you can see it over the internet.
Yeah, I don't think that was the AUI. If I recall, yeah, I don't know the actual answer to that, so I'm just going to defer it, but you can get a hold of me afterwards. I've put my, am I still sharing my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've put my email address there. So if anyone's got any questions or want to follow up on things that they've got there, just go ahead and send me an email.
Okay.
But I just know that the series that we're focused on for the new AUI are the series that have the old AUI today, and
Okay.
the XR does not, as far as I know. So, and I think that's that. Yeah. And thank you very much for letting me come on and blather on for a little while and show you our wares. We're very excited about it. We've got a little more road ahead of us, but this is pretty much, you know, feature complete at this stage. So now we're just doing the final sort of fixes before we think it's good enough for beta. And then we'll have a second beta that adds the HD stuff. And then we'll have our general release for VS series, and during that time we'll have started working on the VS, the GV version as well.
Is there any
Hey, can I bring up one
particular
thing?
date that you have pinpointed
Or
for the VS?
for the general availability?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say a date because that will completely jinx it. So I'm going to keep that to myself. So
Ballpark, first quarter?
I'm going to say before the end of the year would be my hope. Yeah, no, that's my hope. So the beta cycles that I like to see are at least 2 weeks, a month if necessary for each beta. So I expect that the amount of interest and stuff like that is going to be such that 2 weeks is probably about right for people to muck about and tell us what they think and so on and so forth. So if we can compress the beta cycles and then do a new build and go out with beta 2, that will be the important part.
Excellent. Well, thank you so very much, Matt. We really appreciate. I know the pressure you've been under, the the months and months of people saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" It.
I'd like to point out that's years. Yes, months. We passed months and years ago. So yeah, no, it's been tough, and we really appreciate people's patience, and we understand their frustration. We did the app so that people could just sort of dodge around the problem, and we think it's worked out really well for people. But we've always had our sights set on getting this thing out the door so that people can just sort of forget about that problem and move on.
The app got me through to retirement, so thank you.
There you go. Yeah, that's great.
Well, and we really appreciate it, and we'll look forward to seeing each of these things as they, the iterations as they come out, and know that you will respond to the words from the field, and maybe we'll have you back one of these days and we'll show some more toys off.
Sounds great. I'd love to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you, Matt.
My pleasure.
We had this is actually the largest group that we have had in the year and a half of the lunch gathering. This is
That's
the
awesome.
biggest group. We've had over 100 that came through, and we're here for part of it. 108, I think I counted at one point, 109. And we had pretty close to 98 for the majority of the time you were on, Matt.
That's awesome. That's great.
So a lot of interest.
Maybe I'll wait another year before we ship it. Then we'll have an audience of 200 next year. No, maybe not. Just kidding.
Well, I'll tell you this. Every week I send out reminders to those that have asked to be on the list for our presentations. And then I also send out a few notes before the presentation. This week I had almost 50 people ask for invitations above and beyond normal.
Awesome. Yeah.
They're watching for you.
Yes, and we know that, and yeah, so we're very excited to have reached this point finally. So yeah.
And I'm sure the video we'll have to watch and see, but I'll be posting the video in the next later today, tomorrow, something like that, and I'm sure we're going to get a whole lot more views.
Perfect.
Yeah, we have two NV transmitters, so I was interested in finding out what they were going to do with that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's on the list. It's lost in the list, but it's definitely part of the list. So hopefully the app is working well for you right now, and then it's definitely in the plan. It'll actually be the most solid one out the door because it's lost. So we'll have done a bunch of testing before we go.
Okay, the upgrade you mentioned, the other one was just put in the USB and restore. What would the NV process be?
I don't know. I've only seen the front of an NV. I haven't been around the back or taken a hard look at how you do an upgrade.
Well, there's inside the door, there's a little micro motherboard. It looks like a PC. Yeah. And on the bottom of that is a little compact flash card. Right. Which I guess is the hard drive.
Yeah. So it's very similar to the GV.
Okay.
Yeah. So I haven't been in through, what's the actual process on those ones, but I don't imagine it's too difficult. But I'll be able to share that as soon as I do find out, which is going to be in the next couple of months. So I imagine it'll be very similar between the GV and the NV.
Well, you're invited back. You maybe you would jump on top of Jeff one of these weeks, and so you you have some support.
Well, that's true. Yes, it is. Yeah, he's long gone. Yeah, he made sure he was scarce. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's all good.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Barry. John White here.
Thanks, John. So glad to have you guys along.
Okay. Well, you guys have a good evening. A good rest of the day.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to being able to monitor our VS300 LP off this on the iPad back again.
Yep, that's
So
great.
if I had a spare transmitter, I'd be happy to beta test, but
Yeah, no, it's good to hold out for the robust version if you're depending on your transmitter. So yeah, no, it's all good. Yeah, I think that having the final version of the responsive design on the phones and tablets is going to be so cool, because we'll be able to really fine tune the way that works for people to interact with their transmitters, and to be out doing other things and just be able to check up on your phone on different transmitters and maybe even make adjustments is pretty cool.
I have a question about the audio player setup. And in fact, our transmitter right now is utilizing the audio player because we've had an internet interruption. Is there going to be a way to upload multiple files rather than having to do things one at a time? And can we more easily rearrange the playlist? Because that's not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, the audio player is actually the other area that you may notice that you didn't see it. And we have one. We developed the actual user interface portion of it, but underneath there's an audio driver that we're developing, and that's actually been the hardest piece of the entire project, because doing audio drivers for Linux is not for the faint of heart, and so it's actually pretty brutal. So we're working on that. I think that what it could do is at some point I might be able to get them to let me see the user interface again in a test version, and then with people like yourself I can get onto a call and say, does this meet your needs, or do we need to make changes? So while we're still developing the audio driver, we can actually still do some sort of alpha testing of the audio player interface. I think it was pretty good. I used the old one, but this one it's similar but different. So hopefully it meets your needs. But to get your feedback early on would be actually a really good idea.
Okay, I'll go ahead and try to do that by email or something.
Yeah, my email's up, was up on the screen, so it's matt.herden@Nautel.
Okay.
No, and yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for the presentation. I think the new AUI looks really great. The one thing is the RF on-off button able to switch to the locations to where the remote and local indicator is? I'm afraid I'm going to fat finger with the touch screen when I'm going to look for the notifications or the alarms, that I might turn the RF off if I'm playing on a phone.
The good news is that there is, I don't think I'm not sharing anymore, am I?
No, but you can if you wish.
Okay, I'll check that one back up again. That when you do this, you have an "Are you sure" thing. So fat fingering, we realized that this was, you don't want to be turning the RF off by mistake. So that's why we have this "Are you sure?" So if I turn it on now, you can hear it going on. Same thing for when I want to turn it off. There's always that double check, and that's why we put that in there.
Oh,
so
great.
I don't know if, let me see. Yeah, if we go to the smaller size, this, we haven't optimized this at all. So where we put the remote local, we could even make that even smaller. I don't know.
But it is true that you have that little 3-bar selector there on the upper right side, and on a small phone, that could be an issue. So putting the RF on off over by where the remote local.
Oh, you mean here?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If
I see. Yeah,
yeah.
Let me just switch my phone back to the mobile site and go back in again.
Yeah, on the NV series, the remote local was at the bottom of the screen.
Right, and the remote local is basically is just an indicator on this one. I think that I think what we're going to find out is that as we're doing the phone development, we're going to do a lot of usability testing. And so if we realize that, oh, someone could fat finger this, we're going to make sure you can't do that. So there's a limit, you know, I think most people have decent size phones. So if we look at,
but bring it back to full screen and suppose somebody's using a iPad.
Right. And I've been testing on that too. And it's sort of, the good news is that you can't do anything without something, you can't do anything bad without something asking you a question.
Without the
Are you
confirm.
sure?
But
Yeah, exactly. When you're leaving the transmitter site, if you look back at your transmitter or you look at your phone or something like that, and you go, oh no, I left it in local mode. Because you won't be able to make any changes. You won't be able to change presets or anything else like that if you leave it in local mode at the site after doing some work. So we've made it as obvious as we can without making the entire screen red. So
will the scheduler still work?
Oh, the scheduler is part of the system that just runs all by itself. It's the remote access that you won't be able to touch. So now what was happening was that, you know, in local mode, I was able to turn the transmitter on and off, even though it was in local mode. So they fixed that bug, and I can go looking at things. Like I can look at meters and presets. I just can't do anything. I would get errors if I tried to make a change. So that's how that works. There we go. Any other questions?
Make sure you put it back in remote before you leave the transmitter site.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe have a flashing light or something.
Well, that's what we did the red. And, you know, and I think the nice thing is that, you know, if I look at this on my phone, oh, I think I just locked it up, actually. Yeah, the clock's not ticking. Yeah, I did something bad. Anyway, so, but the cool thing is that if I look at my phone, as I'm, you know, I get into my truck and I'm about to head down the hill, then I could just look at my phone, and if it's red on.
That doesn't work for Mount Wilson.
Sorry, what?
That doesn't work for Mount Wilson. We have no cell service up in Mount Wilson.
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Then you're going to need to look at the transmitter or some other method. You know, in the end, we're doing as much as we can without actually sort of, you know, being there and saying, hey, don't forget to check if it's on local or remote. Yeah, so that's, yeah, you would get down the hill to the point where you get service and you'd go, oops, I left it in local.
Strobe lights can be kind of annoying.
Yes, I imagine they would be. Yeah.
And if you come out with that later on external I/O inputs, you could let it flash something else in the room like a strobe light.
Yeah, it's absolutely. So, you know, the other thing you can do, and I guess a lot of sites the Wi-Fi doesn't work, but I've been at some sites where Wi-Fi works just fine. So if my phone is on Wi-Fi mode and the transmitter is is available through the Wi-Fi, I would also be able to check it there before I left the site.
Well, the big thing, Matt, is that more and more stations have eschewed the remote control systems because you guys built in so much ability into your AUI. So right. now the question is, as was brought up, couldn't you get some sort of dry contact, one or two in the back of the unit that could be used for a doorway alert?
Right. Yeah. You're more than welcome. As I say, here's my email address. So if anyone needs to get a hold of me, then feel free. I'm here. Thanks again.
Have a wonderful rest of the day and excellent weekend. Hey.